The World Health Organization believes that we are in the grip of a global epidemic, and it's estimated by the year 2020 that obesity will be the single biggest killer on the planet.
The only way to get well is to fix the problem.
One of the exciting aspects of following these health principles is that people are finding that they're losing inches off their body.
Cholesterol can drop in half in just 3 weeks.
So you can stop and reverse the problem of obesity.
Coronary artery disease can be reversed.
And all we're doing is cooperating with the way the body's intended to operate.
And all you have to do is just tap in on the miraculous innate healing properties of the body.
I felt so much better, and I was already exercising, eating what I thought was a really good diet. But when I really put all these principles together, the synergistic effect in my life is just transformational.
And I have never felt better.
It's very interesting. In my specialty of diagnostic radiology, we've had the ability to go back 3,500 years in time.
The Egyptian mummies dating back 3,500 years ago have been studied by autopsy, where they cut into the mummy and they look at the various organs and arteries, and also by CT scans.
We can look at CT scans, we can look at MRIs. We can basically, through these imaging devices, begin to understand the diseases of the ancient Egyptians.
The paleopathologists are able to determine what types of diseases they had through x-rays and through different types of tests. Paleopathology is a study of diseases of ancient man.
And they can look inside, and what they're discovering is actually fascinating.
The upper echelon of the Egyptian society suffered from the very same diseases that the upper echelon or middle class and upper class of our Western culture deals with today.
In fact, Ramesses the Great is believed to have died from a heart attack.
Heart disease, very common cause of death. Cancer, very common cause of death. Gallbladder disease was rampant there with gallstones, with the increased cholesterol.
Gallstones are always associated, or most often associated, with a very high-fat diet. Again, consistent with the same kind of diet we have in Western nations.
The famous Queen Hatshepsut, her mummy has been identified. And Hatshepsut was probably the most powerful female ruler that ever lived. She actually ruled Egypt as king. She wore the royal headdress with the cobra. She even wore the beard that the pharaohs wore. Hatshepsut is believed to have died from obesity, diabetes, and liver cancer.
And the Egyptians did suffer from diseases that we suffer from today simply because they also had a very similar lifestyle to what we have today.
70% of deaths in North America are due to chronic diseases that are diet and lifestyle induced. Globally, it's about 63% and rising.
On the other hand, just imagine you could reverse many of these diseases by making some simple lifestyle changes. How we eat, how we drink, how we sleep, how we love.
That means 70% of the patients can be treated effectively through lifestyle medicine.
Many of these diseases, especially when it comes to heart disease, coronary artery disease, is totally avoidable.
We know that if people chose to eat differently and if they chose to live active lives, the risk of these diseases would be reduced probably 90% for diabetes, 80% for heart disease, 70% for cancers, just by changing your diet and lifestyle.
One of the food products and major parts of the diet of the ancient Egyptians was definitely meat products.
That Egyptians thrived, if you will. Maybe thrived is too strong a word, but they enjoyed, at least the wealthy did, their rich foods, their fowl, their meat sources.
Any person of history knows who mummies were. They were the priests, the priestess, the kings, the queens. They're also called pharaohs.
It was these affluent folks that began to develop the atherosclerosis and whatnot that we're seeing today.
They were obese. They had, as I mentioned, artery disease all over the body. They had the diseases of rich people.
Those that had diets of overabundance, maybe, every breakfast, lunch, and dinner was kind of like Christmas, Thanksgiving, and New Year's in terms of the diet, and that was killing them, and it's killing us.
However, it's quite interesting when you look at some of the earlier dynasties in ancient Egypt, and the paleopathologists studied the causes of death in those times. They actually ate more of a plant-based diet. They didn't refine their date sugar. They had more whole food plant foods. And they did not have the level of diseases that the latter dynasties had when they ate all types of animal products and unhealthy food.
So as we look at the Egyptian mummies, we see diseases that are facing us today.
And they're discovering a tremendous amount of information, and we now know that if you choose that lifestyle, it doesn't matter if it was 4,000 years ago, you're going to have the same diseases. The lifestyle predicts the outcome.
There's lessons that we can learn today when you look at the older culture, which ate more of a healthy diet, lots of fruits and vegetables, unrefined foods, unrefined date sugar, whole plant foods. They had better health, and you compared it to the later dynasties of ancient Egypt, where they ate more of a diet, actually more like Western diets today. They had all these types of diseases that we have today, the heart disease, the cancer, diabetes, etc.
Ancient Egyptian mummies, as we study them, are unlocking questions we've had for millennia about health, why people lived, why people died. We know why they were dying, but they answer questions not just about the past, but also that we have in the present. What should we be eating now? And really, if we take that information, they're helping us know what we should eat even in the future.
I was the typical Texas boy. I liked my meat, and I liked it smoked on a grill for multiple hours, and I was really good at it.
I thought because I was very active that I needed to eat a certain amount of meat.
I started losing sleep. I developed sleep apnea after doing the Atkins diet. And then I just started craving junk. And I ate that way for, the next 10 years, where I finally reached a max weight of 571 pounds.
I was still in the nothing can touch me phase, right? And I'm not gaining weight as fast as my friend is. I went to the doctor. He says my cholesterol is fine, all that good stuff. But I just kept going, and it never stopped.
Fast forward a little bit to the Roman culture. Everywhere Rome was and Greek culture was, there were these Colosseums. And these gladiators would fight there. They were the biggest spectacle. They'd have all kinds of different things that would lead up to the main event, was the gladiators were fighting. And these gladiators, they had to train and they had to live or die. So they looked at everything in their life to be as successful as possible.
The best example comes from 1800 years ago in Ephesus, which is now modern-day Turkey. They found a grave site from 1800 years ago. It was a 200-square-foot grave site. They dug into the site and they noticed the occupation of the inhabitants. The occupation was told by their instruments, which were tridents, swords, and shields, and they had trident holes in their skulls. So obviously these were gladiators, and of course they were all male.
They found this graveyard of gladiators, and through analyzing the bones, they could tell what the mineral content was of the bones.
And by looking at the mineral content of the bone, you can tell what the diet of an individual has been for a long period of time.
And they could tell it was consistent with eating a basic vegan diet or vegetarian diet. Very high in calcium.
And when they analyzed the bones, what they found is that the diet of the gladiator was vegan. In other words, virtually no animal foods at all.
They were called the Hordenarii, actually meant the barley men.
And this evaluation, this chemical evaluation, fit in with the historical accounts of the gladiators. The gladiators are known as the barley men because they lived on barley and a few beans. That was their diet.
They ate basically a vegetarian, plant-based diet.
Why in the world would gladiators eat a diet, not meat, not dairy foods, not even eggs? I mean, they could have anything. I mean, they were the stars of the entire population. Why would they eat a diet of barley and beans? Because they wanted to win.
It was the best possible diet to not only have physical ability, but mental acuity, two very necessary things if you're going to stay alive as a gladiator.
It was really bad form to lose in the Colosseum. You only got to lose once, by the way. Maybe the crowd gave you a break, but generally it was a fatal outcome if you didn't win.
They were strong physically, and they would also have been very strong mentally. They would have been on the top of their game, and they needed to be.
So they needed endurance and they needed strength. And they discovered, they knew, as men and women have known for thousands of years, that you get strength and endurance from eating a diet of starches. In this case, barley and beans.
If you were going to live long as a gladiator, whatever you ate, whatever you drank, you had to do all to the glory of the emperor if you wanted to live long. And he said, look, not just in a physical sense we want that to happen, but also in a spiritual sense. What's good for the body is also good for the brain.
We've noticed some of these patterns even as recently as during World War II.
Now let me take you to World War II, another tip-off here of the association between how we live and how we die.
During World War I, World War II, there were a lot of losses of life because of injuries concerning war. But one of the biggest discoveries in World War II was that when the Germans came through the Low Country and they took away all the different things that people normally ate, the high dairy and meat diet.
I mean, they took everything they could get to feed their soldiers. So they took the ducks, and they took the meat, and they took the chickens, and they took the eggs and the milk, everything that they could take, any livestock they took to feed their soldiers.
Many of the occupied territories had many of their food supply, or much of their food supply, taken away from them. They were left with plant-based foods.
It left the populace with nothing basically to eat except for fruits, nuts, grains, vegetables, or whatever they could find.
And wouldn't you know, within 2 years of having to live on a very simple diet, these populations became healthier people.
They were fascinated to find that the incidence of coronary artery disease just went totally down.
Heart disease dropped, diabetes dropped, overweight dropped in these countries, and people said, wow, could this actually happen?
Then they said, wait a minute, could it be something to do with diet? Could it in fact be reversed by what we eat? Not just only stopped, but reversed? And that's where we get this idea of coronary risk factors today.
After World War II, when these areas were reestablished, what happened was the access to animal-based foods and actually heavily processed foods increased, and then you see these diseases such as heart disease, hypertension dramatically increasing again.
Or just let me take you to Japan. World War II had just finished. And the Japanese began to look for reasons why in America every second death was related to heart disease, because they couldn't find it in Japan. As a matter of fact, they began to import, they bought coronary artery disease from Johns Hopkins University to the medical school in Tokyo to show medical students what kills every second American here. Again, that was Japan after the war. Today, they're no longer importing these coronary arteries because Japan has become very self-sufficient. They grow their own coronary disease because they have adopted Western ways. And as you adopt Western ways, you also bring with that Western diseases and cause of death.
And now, coming closer to present-day civilization, we notice the same patterns existing in our societies.
Let's just come down to today, and let's look at cultures and how lifestyle affects longevity.
As we look at the world today, investigations have been done into current society and looking for places where people live the longest and the healthiest.
Something that caught my attention is something called the Blue Zones. It's a book written by Dan Buettner from National Geographic magazine.
Blue zones are places in the world where people not only live long lives, but they're actually healthy at these advanced ages.
Where you have people that are in the zone, the blue zone, they're living a long time. So Sardinia, the Okinawans, the Costa Ricans, or in America, the Seventh-day Adventists.
He found 5 zones in the world, and one of them is Loma Linda, California, which is a high concentration of Seventh-day Adventists.
One of the group of people that's been studied the most in modern science in this world are Seventh-day Adventists.
Scientists have wondered, why is it that these individuals have lived so much longer?
Seventh-day Adventists actually live significantly longer than any other group of people on the face of the earth.
They're the only blue zone that is increasing in longevity.
So they started doing studies to look at that, and there's been a number of studies, for instance, done on Seventh-day Adventists here in America, sponsored by the U.S. government and other groups, to unlock that question. The Adventist mortality study showed that Adventists had death rates from all cancers that was 60% lower for Adventist men and 76% lower for Adventist women. Lung cancer, 21% lower. Colorectal cancer, 62% lower. Breast cancer, 85% lower.
The basis for this longevity, this quality of life, is the lifestyle changes.
They have less heart disease, less cancer.
From the time I was 75 until I was 95, I assisted cardiac surgeons in the Los Angeles area. And I quit assisting in cardiac surgery because I wanted to quit while I was still able to make that decision. In other words, my problems of my advanced years would not make me quit. But the fact is, I could do cardiac surgery today.
They actually have a higher quality of life, and if they follow the health principles that they know of, they will live on average 15 years longer than people living next door to them.
So the Adventist mortality study really woke people up. They said, wow, that is significant. 60, 70% lower. We need to look even closer.
Well, they're the most likely to reach the age of 100 and reach it with a health of mind that's still there and still be able to do a lot of things.
And we're finding that when people embrace this, regardless of ethnicity, genetic background, we're finding we're finding longevity, more years, and more life in the years.
When we look at this population of Adventists, we note that they have 8 lifestyle choices. These 8 lifestyle principles have been summed up in an acronym known as New Start.
So New Start is an acronym that actually is an easy way to remember these 8 pillars, these 8 natural laws. N stands for nutrition.
And we now begin to realize more fully that when it comes to health, health is largely a function of how people take responsibility for their own lifestyle.
Growing up, when I would have to lose weight, I was told to go on these different diets, and I guess you could say I've done everything from Atkins to juicing to, sadly, diet pills, fat burners, and things of that nature. Noticing that I had been overweight and that it was a huge problem, not just because of the weight, but because of the different diseases or the different illnesses I had been accumulating.
I'm willing to do whatever it takes, from changing my diet to exercising as much as we can.
Good. All right.
So I've seen many doctors and physicians in my life for a problem that I have, which is gout.
One of the things that have come up as a part of being unhealthy is I have a hard time sleeping. It's called sleep apnea. Basically, you're sleeping and your body is trying to help you breathe, but because there's so much weight pushing down on different parts of your neck or your chest, you actually stop breathing for a while, so your body wakes you up. And that happens to me a lot.
If you had a specific goal, things that you want to accomplish health-wise while you're here, what would those be?
Being here at the Weimar Health Institute, I want to lose a minimum of 40 pounds.
My goal is to nothing less than 30, but I'm really pushing for 40 or 50.
It's not just a crash diet that we're doing, but they're promoting a healthier lifestyle.
A part of that change in the lifestyle has to do with eating.
People who do eat differently in America, and the group that stands out are the Seventh-day Adventist, a religion that promotes vegetarianism.
The U.S. government has spent millions of dollars studying Seventh-day Adventists. They used to study them because they thought they might have more disease, because many Adventists are vegetarian, and vegetarianism was thought to be a disease back in the 1960s. And actually, once they studied them out, they realized the vegetarians had a lot less disease.
I have been inclined to be on a plant-based diet all my life, but I'd say the last half of my life I've been pretty much a vegan.
And when Seventh-day Adventists were studied and their lifespan was compared to general California residents, they were found that Seventh-day Adventists live on average 10 years longer than the typical Californian. That's a study that really needs people's attention. That was published back in about 2001.
Samoan culture is based off of family. Family is everything. Samoan culture, a lot of it has to do with food as well. Food is the way we fellowship with one another.
That's the cheese right there.
Diets will come and go, and diets can be inconsistent, especially since you're only doing well when you're on the diet. Here at the Weimar Health Institute, they're not promoting a diet, they're promoting a change in the lifestyle. They'll say, Dr. Bivens, it seems like what you're talking about here is having a plant-based diet. And actually, an interesting question they'll often say is, they'll go, well, but how do you get enough protein?
I went to a plant-based diet about 10 months ago, and I have seen a huge change, and I have never felt better. It's completely transformed my life, so much so that after 2 or 3 weeks of trying a plant-based diet and really feeling awesome, my husband said, I want to do what you're doing.
So my wife started doing this before I did, and I didn't follow what she was doing. I kind of did my own thing, and that got to be a little difficult just because we were both eating so differently at meals.
At first he was very resistant and going, I'm not going to do that. I'm a meat and potatoes guy. I believe in this Western diet. This is what I was raised in. It'll be fine. And then he saw how great I felt, and he said, that's it. That's all the convincing that I need.
4 weeks in, my body, it was very strange. My body started basically just pushing out the toxins, and my back completely broke out. So it's pretty crazy how your body reacts and gets rid of the things that it figures out it really doesn't need.
After about 3 weeks of doing it, my husband saw a huge difference in me. He didn't want to do it with me because he said, it's too hard, it's too much, I like to work out, I need my protein, where am I going to get my protein, which is the biggest misconception.
And I would just refer them to the gorilla. What does the gorilla eat? Look at his muscles and then go see what he eats.
Where does the cow we eat get his or her protein? And the answer, of course, is we get adequate protein from plants.
By the government's own admission, depending on your sex and weight, they say you need between 45 and 54 grams of protein a day as a recommended minimum. The average plant-based protein intake, that is a person who's not eating any animal products at all on a plant-based diet, they're getting about 85 grams of protein a day.
And when you talk about the diseases that threaten Americans, you don't think about cholera or malaria or typhoid. You think about breast cancer, colon cancer, strokes, heart attacks. These are the things that Americans fear. And the scientific research clearly shows that the rich Western diet is at the heart of all these diseases.
Let's look at two of the killer diseases in America today, diabetes and high blood pressure.
Adult onset diabetes. We don't call it adult onset diabetes anymore. You know why? Because we're seeing it in children. We call it type 2 diabetes now. We've got an epidemic. Believe me, you don't want diabetes. It's the #1 cause of amputation, the #1 cause of kidney disease, and #1 cause of blindness.
In the most recent data, when they look at Seventh-day Adventists, they find some are eating very similar to the general American population. We would call them omnivores. They're eating quite a bit of meat and milk, eggs, cheese. They're the reference group, if you will.
Not all Adventists live healthy, so you have the ones that live healthy and the ones that don't. And so you can study them as a subgroup.
If you look then at those who start getting away from those animal products, they're eating them very seldom, you find that they only have maybe 60% of the risk of having high blood pressure or diabetes. You move to those who've gotten rid of the poultry and the red meat. They're just having fish and dairy products and vegetarian sources of nutrition. They're cutting their risk roughly in half. It continues to go down until you get to the vegans among the Seventh-day Adventists.
Again, totally related to what they ate. The vegans had much less problems with blood pressure.
Those individuals have only 1/5 the likelihood of having diabetes and high blood pressure.
A person comes in with type 2 diabetes. This is not juvenile onset diabetes, but type 2 diabetes. And the physician will say, we're going to manage your diabetes. We're going to diet control it. We're going to perhaps put you on some medication, and we're just going to try to manage it. The truth is, we can completely reverse it.
I have seen many people reverse diabetes. And you'll say, well, what is really reversal? Well, to me, it's being on no medication, no insulin, and having normal blood sugars. That's reversal.
And then you said you frequently eat between meals.
Yeah, I have a bad problem with snacking.
Okay. Is it usually, what triggers a snacking?
Boredom?
No,
Boredom and just trying to get through the day. I picked that habit up in college.
But applying principles of health in diet and exercise can not only prevent the disease, but it can reverse it. And we know that's true of heart disease too.
Day number 1, starting off in our 5K walk. Vasa and I are holding up the back, making sure everyone is safe. But we're making our way. Right, Vas? Yeah.
Anything else that you're concerned about, either in your family that you want to avoid, or that you, in your family history that you want to avoid, or even things that you, for your own health, want to do differently?
Yeah, well, actually, my family, on both sides of my family, have a history of heart disease.
The #1 cause of death in the United States and in the world is cardiovascular disease.
Well, one of the ways we can avoid heart disease is just by not eating cholesterol.
And one way we monitor the risk for cardiovascular disease through the years has been cholesterol, total cholesterol levels.
Cholesterol is in meat, milk, eggs, and cheese. It's not in fruits, grains, nuts, or vegetables.
Cholesterol only lives in the animal kingdom. There's no cholesterol in the plant kingdom.
Many people believe that cholesterol is the building block for heart disease. Again, follows the same pattern. Vegans have the least cholesterol because there's not cholesterol in plant products. Then lacto-ovo, more. Pesco, more. Non-vegetarian, the most.
There are really 2 categories of foods that are causing these diseases. One is animal products, and especially fatty animal products and processed foods.
Then why don't we move towards whole foods? Why don't we use plant-based diets?
So the simple solution is to eat a more plant-based diet, eat more fiber, phytochemicals, antioxidants, all of these protective compounds, which are concentrated in plant foods.
So one of the things that I've always learned was that in order to lose weight, I have to go on these diets or crash diets, from Atkins to fasting, or drinking smoothies, or drinking just juicing. And so going on these crash diets, I thought I would lose weight. One thing I noticed is I would lose all this weight, but immediately, as soon as I get off of those diets, I'd gain all my weight back or even more.
I want you to focus on the principles. What is it going to take to live healthy? And I promise you the weight loss will be a side effect. Like you said, one of the first principles is breakfast, breakfast, breakfast. Breakfast like a king, lunch like a prince, dinner like a pauper, if you do dinner at all.
Why should we eat breakfast like a king, lunch like a prince, and supper like a pauper? Well, when you change your metabolism by eating that big meal at breakfast, you're in calorie burning mode. When you restrict yourself from calories, you may downregulate your metabolism to go into storage mode, and then the next calorie that comes by is going to get stored straight on your hips. But when you give it a good, healthy breakfast, you change your metabolism and the body says, oh good, I don't have to be so worried that the next calorie that comes by has to be stored because this body might starve me again.
Your body wants to be healthy. It wants to heal itself.
Still losing the weight, on track to reach my goal. And I don't know, there's just too much energy that I don't know what to do with it.
When you start to put healthy food in your body, the changes occur very, very rapidly. It is astonishing.
At our lifestyle centers throughout this country, for instance, Weimar, just coming there, your cholesterol can drop in half in just 3 weeks. 50% reduction sometimes in just 3 weeks.
But the main thing that folks should be concerned about is how long you live and how likely you are to get disease. And there have been 3 major studies published on this subject, big meta-analyses. And these meta-analyses, and only 3 big ones have been published, they show consistently that low-carb diets, in other words, low plant food diets, high animal food diets, consistently they show that they're associated with more heart disease and more death, more mortality.
If you look around the world and you look at these people in the blue zones, the average percentage of calories from carbs ranges from about 50% to about 80%. Carbs are not the enemy, refined carbs are the enemy.
There have been a number of recent studies. Dr. Bieshold out of Phoenix, Arizona, first she did an observational study showing that plant-based diet actually significantly improves your depression and anxiety stress score. It's called a DASS score.
So the mood actually is improved when you get the right amount of carbohydrates, but also the right type of carbohydrates and less protein.
Then she followed up with an interventional study, and that's where she took people who are not on a plant-based diet and put them on a plant-based diet for 2 weeks. She also put them on a plant-based diet plus fish for 2 weeks to see which one would be superior. And it turned out the fish diet wasn't any more superior than the carnivore diet. But the plant-based diet, significant, dramatic changes, statistically significant changes in just 2 weeks in their mental ability.
We see when people go on this diet and drink plenty of water, get plenty of rest, follow these natural remedies, that it's just like something snaps in their brain, and it doesn't take like weeks or months.
Plant-based diet is key in our program for depression and anxiety recovery. The results are outstanding because it's a comprehensive approach. It's not just diet. We also utilize exercise, and we're utilizing correct thoughts and a lot of different modalities. But the diet is a key element.
I went on a plant-based diet about 5 weeks ago.
It's amazing because even if they had not told me he had the diet change, the first thing I noticed was he was bringing his schoolwork in.
And my teacher has actually been bragging on how much better I've been behaving since I've been on the diet.
In class, he wasn't getting as distracted, that he was paying attention, he was able to listen more closely, he was being alert, his discernment was better, he was more diligent, everything.
I can pay attention more. My mind is more clear since I've been on the diet.
It's just a huge improvement. And I also noticed he lost a lot of weight. But the main things I noticed was behavioral.
A study in a middle school has showed clearly that switching the menu from animal source to plant source diet almost eliminated absenteeism, increased and enhanced attention and homework performance and performance at school. It almost eliminated acts of violence as well as teen pregnancies.
And so they just feel better. Everywhere the blood flows, everywhere that perfect circulation goes, they feel better. Not just in body, but in mind. Clears up their thoughts even.
And every single day since I've been on a plant-based diet, the clarity continues to increase and my face continues to look younger, and my body feels like I look more vibrant. I've looked at pictures of myself before and after, and I look 5 years older, even just 10 months ago, than I do now.
What we eat does get turned into neurotransmitters. It actually helps us or hurts us, depending on what we're eating in regards to our brain chemistry. And it plays a vital role in health of the brain.
They'll say within 3 or 4 days, they seem to have clarity. They're alert. They listen in class better. They absorb more, and they do better on their tests.
The fog has been lifted out of my head. I think clearer. I've got better ideas, I believe. I can put 2 and 2 together faster, and just in general, I'm happier.
In fact, diet alone, studies show that diet alone will reduce your depression and anxiety scores by half just by dramatically changing your diet to a plant-based. And so that's significant. Now, we go for more than just half, and so that's why we have a whole program that includes more than this. But just the diet alone will make a big difference.
You don't have to choose between high quality living and longevity. It's the same program. The same New Start approach to living helps you live longer, and it helps you live better.
The letter E stands for exercise, and they have not held back when it comes to exercise. As hard as it feels, I feel good. I'm not just saying that. I really do feel good.
One of the other things that's very common in these cultures of longevity is that these people also are active. They do exercise.
I love to hike. That was my favorite of all things, was to hike.
I have a big yard around my home, and I mow my own lawn and things like that.
Yes, all my life, very active.
Now, they're not doing necessarily marathons, or they're spending a lot of time in the gym pumping weights or whatever, but they're doing moderate exercise. They do exercise as part of their routine daily activity, like they're doing farming, they're doing walking. They get out and do simple exercises, and yet this contributes to their long, healthy life.
When it comes to preventive medicine, there are few things as powerful as exercise. In fact, some people would say there's nothing as powerful as physical activity and exercise.
As a consequence of switching to these high carbohydrate or high starch diets, you become a winner.
Many top athletes, whether it be in cycling or whether it be in track events, they recognize that the plant-based diet is what's going to lead to victory.
The type of training that I do, it's called CrossFit, and really you're constantly pushing your body to its limit to see if you can get it there and how fast you can get it there. And when I changed the way that I started to eat, I didn't tell anybody that I trained with. I was doing that because I know that the way they think, because of the stress that we put on our bodies on a regular basis, they would basically have said, oh, you're crazy, you're gonna fall apart, you're gonna lose strength, there's no way you're gonna be able to complete what we do.
So when Randy told me he was vegan, I totally didn't believe him. I mean, I really didn't. He was like, yeah, I'm vegan. Because I was asking him what his diet plan was, because the guy's like super shredded and super cut. And I was like, what are you doing? He's like, I'm vegan. I was like, what? I saw how he lasted longer than I did during some of the workouts. I would think I'd be better because I'm younger and I have really good cardiovascular, but he's in amazing shape.
It's helped me be lighter, it's helped me be faster, it's helped my endurance.
He's always pushing it to the next level. He has the ability to go longer than everybody else. And that is because he's vegan, it's sad to say, because I'm not.
The way that I eat and the way that I fuel myself, because I look at it as fuel, I don't look at it as just food for my body. I think it's set me apart from some of the other folks that I go and work with every day.
So I immediately felt better going plant-based. In fact, I got stronger physically. I went from being able to overhead shoulder press, 225 for reps. Next thing you know, I was able to do 275. My recovery time was a whole lot quicker.
Endurance athletes all know this. People are familiar with the term carbohydrate loading. Well, real winners carbohydrate load every day.
And as a matter of fact, the strongest man in the world, he is completely vegan.
The other day, a man just broke the world record for lifting, and he's a
vegan power is what he screamed out after, lifting that weight.
Of course, many athletes have decided to go plant-based because it actually helps with endurance.
Since 1968, the winning athletes in the Olympics, the people placed in the top 4 positions since 1968 in long-distance running events have been from Kenya and Ethiopia. Diets of starch, corn, for example. 80% of their diet from starches.
We should have known that from the animal world. Elephants can run all night long and they don't get tired, and they can run 20 miles an hour for 12, 14 hours, and that's a massive animal that's moving all of this mass. But these are plant-based animals. You won't see cheetahs run for 12 hours. After about 90 seconds they're through and they can't necessarily continue on. And actually, if the cheetahs changed their diet, they would actually have more endurance.
Dr. Olaf, a Scandinavian researcher, studied 9 highly trained athletes. For the first 3 days, he gave them only animal source food. And then he put them on an exercise bike. They exercised speedily for 57 minutes. I think they got exhausted. The next 3 days, that's 3 days, he gave them half animal and half vegetarian diet. They exercised on the speed bike up to 1 hour and 50 minutes, then they were exhausted. But the third set of 3 days, he gave them complete vegetarian diet. They exercised almost 3 hours.
That's why these athletes win, and why endurance athletes these days all eat a diet high in starch. And why everybody should, even if you're running after a 2-year-old or just trying to get out and back from your car. People who eat starch-based diets are strong, trim, healthy.
Studies show that how long your quality of life is has a lot to do with whether you have been a regular aerobic exerciser.
Yeah. One of the biggest things we try and teach them to do is exercise. Right. Because exercise, like I said in the lecture, is like the ultimate self-control drug. It cuts cravings within 15 minutes.
Fitness has benefits even if you're not succeeding in achieving your weight loss goals.
How far would you have to walk if you were on level ground? How far would you have to walk to lose a pound? And people say, 4 miles, 6 miles. It turns out it's 35 miles. So my wife was in weight loss for a number of years. She's a registered dietitian. She had this mantra. She said, it's not what thou joggest, it's what thou hoggest. It's what you're eating that affects your weight. We really tell people that your central exercise should be walking. The question is, how far should you walk? The goal is at least 3 miles a day, at least 6 days a week, at least 3 miles an hour. So if you're doing 3 miles a day and you're doing 3 miles an hour, simple math will tell you that you're walking for an hour.
As long as you just get out and walk, and you can break it up into sections, not doing the whole 3 miles all at once. You can do a half mile here, a mile there throughout your day.
By exercising, clearly you can reduce your risk for cancer. By exercise, you can clearly keep your weight down. By exercising, you clearly reduce your cholesterol. By exercising, you clearly reduce your risk for hypertension.
On the days that you exercise, you'll actually notice that your blood pressure is a whole lot lower. On the days that you're sedentary, you'll actually notice your blood pressure a little bit higher. So you said that you worked out today, and that's part of the reason why I think your blood pressure may be lower than what it typically is.
Right on.
All right. So I just came out of Dr. Hillman's office, really excited. I'm down about 20 pounds from the original month ago when I weighed in, and my blood pressure dropped 40 points. So that's huge. I went from 140 something to about 102/62, and I've never seen those numbers ever in my life. So it's really exciting, and I'm looking forward to more progress.
So it's important to exercise at least 30 minutes a day, but that's a minimum. I like to personally exercise an hour and a half a day. And so I get out there and just walk with my shoulders back and my head erect, breathing that good fresh air.
But it really takes about 18 to 21 days to really retrain to kind of get a new neural pathway. And so when we talk, for example, when people start an exercise program, we say, look, you really need to commit to this for 3 weeks.
You might think, I'll never like exercise, but guess what? When you start exercising, when you start making that change, pretty soon you're going to feel like, what am I going to do if I don't exercise? It feels so good.
And at the end of 3 weeks, then you go, well, wow, this isn't as hard as it was on day 1 or day 2. And we know that when people start choosing good, healthy habits, they also choose other healthy habits. They sleep better, they drink more water, their nutrition improves, in all areas of their life, they're better. And we know that they actually, because of that, they live a lot longer also.
W stands for water, which is very, very important. It's in fact critical to have good health.
I drink water.
I start out in the morning and I have 2 glasses when I first get up.
Water is a great remedy, and it helps us with our circulation. It helps us get rid of toxins. We really need to drink enough water.
An optimal amount of water has many physical benefits. It detoxifies the liver and kidneys.
I've had 3 kidney stones, so over time I've had to learn that flushing my kidneys on a regular basis is important, but also through this diet, learning that water is so important, and it's really become kind of just my drink of choice now.
It improves our skin health.
And I could tell a big difference in my skin and in my eyes and in my everything just felt good. And so I try to drink as much water as I possibly can.
It assists in weight loss. You want to actually start drinking water when you first wake up in the morning, and then you want to drink throughout the day. The ideal is to drink away from meals.
Water between meals only, not during meals.
Oh, not during meals?
Yeah, not during meals.
Okay.
Because if you drink a lot of water or any fluid with your meal, it dilutes those digestive enzymes and you're not able to digest food adequately.
But the other thing is, when you drink, you fill up with water rather than the food that would fill you up, and the water will dissipate pretty quickly and it's not going to leave you feeling fuller longer. So if you were to fill up and feel 80% full with food versus 80% full with some water and food, you're less likely to be hungry after just the food than if you had the water and the food together.
Okay, yeah.
Okay.
I hear you.
It also increases our physical and overall mental performance.
And that helps with recovery with working out and exercising and helping just flush out any toxins that I breathe in through, being outside or whatever. But yeah, I drink a lot of water.
And we found that blood fluidity is linked to everything from risk of cancer to blood pressure to even, believe it or not, helping you lose weight. There's a connection with blood fluidity.
Most headaches are caused by dehydration, believe it or not. So if you're getting a lot of headaches, drinking enough water is one of the keys to improving that.
Cells need to be hydrated because our body is actually is mostly water. So our cells need to be hydrated. That's point number 1.
60 to 70% of our body weight is water. And it's even higher in the brain. 74 to 80% of our brain mass is water. So it shouldn't be a big surprise to us if we're dehydrated. It's going to be very difficult for us to have optimal mental health.
Point number 2, we find that when we reduce the amount of sugary drinks, we actually improve our health.
One of the biggest blunders people make in terms of their nutrition, and especially people who struggle with weight issues, is drinking their calories.
Dr. Chan at Loma Linda University found that those individuals who would drink more than 5 glasses of water per day and compared them with those who were drinking less than 2 glasses of water per day, their risk of dying of a heart attack in those frequent water drinkers was cut in half.
And she identified the people who drank more than 5 glasses of water per day had half as much coronary heart disease.
Now, a lot of people say, well, Dr. DeRose, I'm glad for that because I love to drink my blank.
And people say, well, I drink tea. You know, doesn't that qualify? Well, actually, the studies have been interesting, and that is, there is no replacement for water.
Well, Dr. Chan looked at that as well. And what she found is the more they drank of other beverages, it was actually the opposite effect.
They've done studies looking at herbal teas. They've looked at, caffeinated or, things that have theophylline in it. Those teas, coffee, cola beverages, sodas, fruit juices, sugar-sweetened beverages. They've looked at all those categories, and basically all of those other drinks actually have an adverse effect on your risk for heart disease.
So there's nothing quite like water when it comes to optimally hydrating us, and this water drinking not only improves our blood fluidity, which ties in with a whole host of diseases, but there's actual data showing that this can decrease our risk from one of the leading killer diseases in the Western world, which is heart disease.
That is, drinking plenty of water reduces your risk. If you look at those same things, caffeinated beverages especially increase your risk.
Drinking water optimally can lower inflammation in the bloodstream by about 30%. Inflammation in the bloodstream can actually dramatically increase your risk for diabetes, heart disease, cancer, and autoimmune disease, many complications. So make sure you drink your water optimally.
But if you drink 64 ounces of water, if you're a full-size adult, if you drink 64 ounces of water every day before 5 p.m., it can make a world of difference in your energy levels.
Water is so important for our mental health. When we become dehydrated, our brain just doesn't work well. We have lower energy and fatigue, and there's also a toxic buildup.
But when you drink water, it is the best substance. It's the optimal substance for brain function, decreased risk of heart attack. Water. There's so much we could say about it. Move towards the water. The S stands for sunlight.
Study after study has come out suggesting that there are benefits to sunshine. There are associations between more sun exposure or, for example, living closer to the equator and decreased risks of certain diseases. Things like multiple sclerosis or MS, lessened risks if you were raised closer to the equator than further away from it.
Sunlight is often overlooked, and especially nowadays because people are afraid that they're going to get skin cancer.
I think people have gone to the extreme of not wanting to be exposed to sunlight at all.
Well, getting a sunburn is never a good idea. We need to use sun safety and take care not to burn when we're in the sun.
One shouldn't get red from sunlight. We should avoid that, especially if you are fair-skinned. You should avoid that. But that does not mean that you shouldn't get sunlight.
But getting sunshine on your skin for 15 minutes a day is a very healthy thing to do.
Even in the winter, I try to run outside when I exercise.
You put your skin out into the sunshine breaks down the nitrates in your skin, releases nitric oxide, also lowers your blood pressure. So greens, sunshine, getting out in the air, exercise, all helps to lower your blood pressure.
More cancers would be prevented by getting adequate amounts of sunlight than being over-worried about skin cancer.
Cancers like colon cancer, breast cancer, decreased risks in people with more sun exposure, and the connection that many people seem to be making with many of these diseases is with vitamin D.
Clearly, vitamin D is now being understood as one of the most important chemicals, if you want to call it a chemical, in our body.
It seems that adequate levels of vitamin D are very important for a healthy immune system that can have a role in preventing us from autoimmune diseases, things like rheumatoid arthritis and lupus, conditions where our body is attacking itself, as well as conditions like cancer, which could theoretically be a result of an underactive or an immune system that is not responding appropriately when cells make that turn over to cancer.
Vitamin D has a tremendous positive role in protecting the expression of these bad genes, kind of suppressing these bad genes. So it has a role beyond what we would think.
So vitamin D is a big subject today, and many of us in clinical practice are monitoring our patients' vitamin D levels. If they're low, we're telling them to get more judicious sun exposure, or if it's in the winter months and they're far from the equator where we can't make vitamin D, then take a vitamin D supplement.
We need that vitamin D that comes from the sun, because that is one of the best sources of vitamin D.
The benefits of sunshine transcend vitamin D, however. For example, the sun has mood-elevating effects.
People who are deprived from sunlight, they have many problems, and once again, starting from the top, they have problems with their thinking, with the way they feel. It's very well described that there is a kind of depression that is associated with less exposure to daylight, to sunlight.
One of the things sunlight is beneficial for is stopping and reversing insomnia and depression. We found that people that do light therapy in the morning and sometimes then in the afternoon, and natural light is always the best, they actually can stop and reverse insomnia that's of course related and a symptom of major depression.
So you don't want to go excessively in the sun.
A lot of people say, oh, be careful, you'll get too much sun, but really, most people are not getting enough.
But on the other hand, you don't want to keep yourself away from the sun, so much so that you contribute to vitamin D deficiency.
The most important prevention for skin cancer is not getting sunburned. So yes, get your daily sun, but make sure you're judicious about it and don't get burned.
Getting out there, exercising in the sunshine and the fresh air will help you to live longer as well.
We come to the T, and the T stands for temperance.
When we look at the definition of temperance, we talk about abstaining from things that are bad for us, but also moderation in things that are good for us.
The word temperance is not something that we hear a lot in our society today, but we do hear the word addiction. One of the things that scientists have recently discovered is that there's a common pathway for addiction in the brain, and that pathway is the same whether it is for drug abuse, whether it's for alcohol, whether it's for eating disorders, or even self-mutilation behaviors like cutting, for example, also is lighting up that same addiction pathway in the brain.
Alcohol is the second or third leading cause of death, depending on how you look at it. The Centers of Disease Control in Atlanta calls it the third leading cause of death in this country. It's amazing to me that some so-called scientists advocate that people drink alcohol to prevent heart disease when it's the third leading cause of death.
Many people I see in my office often ask, aren't there health benefits to alcohol?
There is absolutely no safe level of alcohol consumption when it comes to cancer.
Types of cancers that have been correlated with alcohol use are cancers that you and I often have fears about. These are cancers such as breast cancer, oral cancer, and colon cancer.
That's right. A woman who's a moderate drinker is putting herself at measurably increased risk of breast cancer.
In June 2010, the American Institute for Cancer Research made the statement that there is no safe threshold for the use of alcohol when it comes to the occurrence of these cancers.
Nobody should be resorting to alcohol for health benefits. Even if it may lower your risk of heart disease, it's increasing your risk of dying from any cause and increasing your risk of cancer.
The National Institute on Alcohol Abuse and Alcoholism's official statement concerning alcohol and health has actually stated that the benefits that come from alcohol may not actually be from the alcohol itself, but other components of the foods that are made into alcohol, the plant-based foods.
It causes high triglycerides, it causes hypertension, it increases the risk of bleeding strokes.
Now someone says, but Dr. DeRose, I still like to have a glass of wine. Well, listen, that's up to you. You can make your own decisions, but don't label it as a health-giving behavior.
The use of alcohol stimulates the same addiction circuit as any other drug.
We are voluntarily, when we consume alcohol, we are voluntarily suppressing the frontal lobe of our brain.
This darkened area is the judgment center and the center for tensions and anxieties. Even small amounts of alcohol tend to deaden these centers, and because of this may provide an illusion of relaxation.
And so one of the worst things that we can do, especially if we're trying to optimize our brain function is to drink alcohol even a little bit.
So a practical illustration of the concept of temperance, at least in my book, as I read the medical research, is total avoidance from alcohol is the optimal.
One of the really important things to understand about any addictive behavior is that it impairs our frontal lobe function.
The area of analysis, of decision making, of our willpower,
which impairs our ability to make good, sound decisions and to think clearly. And that, of course, impacts the rest of our lives. So any amount of addictive behavior is not healthy for the brain.
And in reality, there's other things, or even some foods, other substances, of course drugs, that adversely affect the frontal lobe of the brain.
One of the common addictions that Americans deal with is an addiction to caffeine.
Some of my patients have lowered their cholesterol 20% just by cutting caffeine out of their life.
The first week I stopped drinking caffeine, I felt terrible. I slept, I was moody, I was grouchy. I would come home in the middle of the day to take a nap because it was flushing out of my system.
One of the big problems that caffeine causes, especially in relation to mental health, is that it decreases the blood flow to the brain by about 27%. And that's not a good thing, because in order to think clearly, in order to process correctly, we need the blood flowing to the brain, which carries the oxygen and the nutrients so that our nerve cells can function properly.
In fact, caffeine has been known to worsen psychiatric illnesses such as depression and anxiety. With my patients who struggle with insomnia, lack of sleep, I tell them to come off of caffeine. Initially, they're going to have a worsening in their sleep, but in the long run, we know that it will improve their REM sleep, an essential component of deep sleep.
In addition, caffeine also causes what we call a withdrawal symptom, and that can increase irritability, it can cause headaches, and it is an addiction, so it makes you crave more caffeine to get that same stimulating effect.
Once you get on the other side of about 5 days, the energy level just shoots through the roof. It helps that I stay hydrated, but it's just, I look at my body like a gas tank, and whenever I drink caffeine, it's taken a quarter of my gas tank, and I really only have 75% left for the day. And I notice that difference when I don't drink caffeine. It's crazy. I have a full gas tank all day.
We found from studies at the Lifestyle Center of America that those who are trying to cut out habits that are detrimental to their health are going to find this difficult when they're consuming coffee.
And so a lot of people, especially when they feel really fatigued in the afternoon, one of the big causes is because they are drinking caffeine, which causes a letdown, and then they're also dehydrated from the effect of the caffeine as well. But there's more subtle forms of addiction as well. For example, food addiction is one of the biggest problems in America. If you look at the obesity epidemic, for example, we see that people get addicted to things like fats, to sugars, to meat. When we indulge in these things that are unhealthy for us, and even some things that might be okay in moderation, it can really damage us, and it can make us slaves to those things.
Let's not do anything to voluntarily make our minds less effective.
Temperance, a big fancy word that just basically means the moderate use of that which is good and the total abstinence of that which is negative. Temperance, balance.
Let's talk a little bit about AIR. AIR being one of the, the acronym in New Start, the A is for air.
And of course, we're speaking about good fresh air. What's surprising to many people in the urban environments in which the majority of the world's population lives is that many of us are deprived of this very important commodity.
There's actually good air and bad air.
We know that foul air in the cities will, for example, double heart attack rates, which is a big problem.
If you go into a congested city environment, you actually don't, you kind of feel a little down. You're a little gloomy. The air is just not as fresh as compared to going along a mountain stream with this river that's cascading down the mountains and the birds are singing. The sense that you have there, and why is that?
In these environments, there are negatively charged air ions.
And we can go out on the trails and just breathe in just good air, good quality air.
The air around waterfalls, lakes, oceans, pine trees, cedar trees, mountains, that negatively charged air is good for you. It's actually positive for you.
Have you ever noticed how good you feel after a thunderstorm or after being by the ocean surf? The reason again is that these environments create and have the highest concentration of negative ions available.
These negatively charged ions have a mood elevating effect.
Out there in the light rain, when the rain comes down, the negative ions go up. All of that fresh air, anytime you can get out in the fresh air, you're going to be better for it mentally and physically.
The brain needs oxygen. The nerve cells need oxygen to function adequately. And when you're not sitting up straight, when you're not breathing deeply, then your tissues are going to be lacking oxygen and you're going to start feeling tired and fatigued.
When we have this, oxygenation that's increased, it really does improve our mental ability, and you just feel much better. I mean, you feel like, man, my mind is clear.
And so it's very important that we get that fresh air as we want to improve our mental health and our cognitive performance.
So getting enough fresh air is actually valuable, and the quality of air is also very important.
So my prescription for health would include getting out into nature. Get out after a thunderstorm and walk. Go by the ocean surf. Go to an area that has up in the mountains with lots of trees. Get the best out of the time that you exercise.
The thing is, you can combine these things. You know, if you're drinking water, you're out in the sunshine, and you're exercising out in nature and you're getting fresh air, you didn't have to think, well, I just got 4 of the 8 natural laws and I thought I was just walking out in nature.
The R stands for rest.
Well, I think that, of course, that a good night's sleep is very valuable.
I believe in going to bed and sleeping a full 8 hours.
When I wake up in the morning, I feel the same thing, same as I did when I was 35.
I value rest like I value a healthy diet and exercise.
Rest is very important for mental health, and getting appropriate, adequate amounts of rest is ideal for keeping your brain functioning on a healthy level.
Getting adequate sleep helps us out in a number of ways. It actually is a detoxifying agent.
Our body was made to rest. At night, our body recovers from the stresses of the day, the damage that the day has brought to the DNA and other things. They are recovered, they are repaired at night.
The wonderful thing about the human body is that scratches, blemishes, cuts get repaired naturally. Well, how does that happen? That really happens when we sleep.
We want to be sleeping anywhere from 7 to 9 hours is usually ideal, depending on the person. But once you get not enough sleep or too much sleep, then you start having problems.
Some people say I get by fine with 6 hours of sleep, but we really say 7 hours when you're in a full adult past the age of 30, somewhere around at least 7 to 8 hours of sleep.
Most people in America are getting more on the 6 to 7 hour range. It's not enough to rest 7 to 9 hours every night. We want to keep in mind what time of day is ideal to rest.
2 hours of sleep before midnight is worth 4 hours of sleep after midnight.
We really recommend that you try to get as much sleep before midnight. There's actually some good studies that show that melatonin and serotonin are produced at a much higher rate before midnight. Melatonin is one of those neurotransmitters which helps you get to sleep, and serotonin are produced at a higher rate before midnight.
We want to keep in mind what time of day is ideal to rest.
And if you think, well, I got 7 hours of sleep, but I went to bed at 1 and I got up at 8, that probably isn't a good sleep cycle.
If we try to sleep during the day, even if we got the same amount of sleep, the sleep is not going to be the same quality.
We really recommend to try to get in bed by 10 o'clock.
And so we find that sleep before midnight actually allows you to get more of that deep sleep, where you get that real consistent reparative aspect of sleep for the brain.
The hours of sleep in the first half of the night repair the body. The hours of sleep in the latter half of the night repair the mind. REM sleep, rapid eye movement sleep. That's important in repairing the mind. And of course, there's, we're having REM sleep all throughout the night. But as we go towards the 4 a.m., 5 a.m., 6 a.m. time frames, you have more REM sleep typically.
Last night was the first night that I had probably the best sleep since I've been here. I only woke up once, but even after I woke up, I went right back to sleep. Just a lot of it has to do with the change in that lifestyle. And I'm looking forward to just completely getting rid of the sleep apnea, just being able to sleep through the night without having to wake up.
The brain needs sleep on a regular basis in order to rejuvenate its nerve cells and to actually be able to process the events from the day.
Those hours of sleep need to be in a dark room without, outside noises if it's possible, that it needs to be a peaceful place, and the atmosphere has to be a reasonable atmosphere to allow us to have a really good deep sleep.
And so we need that nightly rest to be able to allow our brain to function optimally.
Every one of us is programmed with a body clock. That body clock still functions if we were to lock ourselves up in a cave for many days. In fact, researchers have done this. And they find that people, even when they're cut off from all time cues, no light and dark cues, no newspapers, no television, no wristwatches, no cell phones, these individuals still stay on a circadian rhythm. Circa meaning about, DN referring to a day. So it's about a 24-hour rhythm.
It's best to take that rest until the next morning or a rest on the weekly cycle.
But beyond the circadian rhythm, we also have weekly rhythms. They're called circa-septan rhythms.
We in humanity all march to a 7-day week.
Every culture throughout the world that I'm aware of still adheres to a weekly cycle of 7 days.
And there's times when humanity has tried to change that. The French tried to make everything metric, including the week, and tried to change it into a 10-day week with 10 hours, 100 minutes in each hour, 100 seconds in each minute.
And the mental institutions filled up because the decade, which is what they called the week, led to decadence and everything fell apart.
The other amazing thing about what science has shown is that every living creature has a 7-day rhythm. And that's more than just humans. A lot of people think, well, humans march to a 7-day week because somehow it started early in civilization and we've just hung on to that. But why is it that flies have a 7-day rhythm? Why is it that algae have a 7-day rhythm and plants have a 7-day rhythm? Those things can't read the Bible. The lunar month isn't divisible by 7. The year's not divisible by 7. There's nothing in the planets that we can find. And so the question is, why 7?
It brings me back to that very ancient council in the Bible where God said that He had given this day of rest to His people.
And I think that speaks to what the Bible has to say in regards to how we began, how life began. It was a common designer, a common creator that programmed in this 7-day rhythm.
He called it a Sabbath, a day where we could come apart.
And I think it's powerful evidence, actually, for a creator God.
One of the interesting things about Seventh-day Adventists is that they keep the Sabbath holy from sundown Friday until sundown on Saturday.
Sabbath keeping actually does have some significant mental health advantages. There's an improvement in IQ, even though they don't study on Sabbath or go to school on Sabbath.
So circa-septan rhythms is not just something from the culture, it's actually something biologically innate.
There's benefit to a nightly rest, but also benefit to a weekly rest.
So these things are part of our physiology. What is so interesting to me as a physician, if we cooperate, if we collaborate with these rhythms, we do best.
You know, you can't underestimate the remedy of what I call vitamin R, which is rest. And if it were sold in bottles, it would be the most popular vitamin on the market.
So we can talk about food, exercise, rest, sunshine, and that is all relevant and important. But you can have all those things to the maximum and still be unhealthy.
Many times when we're thinking about health, we tend to focus on physical health and even emotional health. But sometimes we don't really understand the importance of spiritual health.
And many people ask me, why do you throw in that last T for trust in God or trust in divine power?
Trusting in God actually has now been scientifically shown to be an additional health principle.
We know that people who have a relationship in a church, and there are a lot of good studies done where they looked at people, the social networking that occurs from a church family. Well, they go, well, that's just because of the social networking. Obviously, people who have more social contacts live longer. Well, they carved statistically the social benefit of the church group out, and they still saw a real benefit for longevity for going to church.
Not just based on social relationships, but just on that connectedness with the spiritual aspect.
And so the researchers couldn't explain it except that there is some God factor that they called it.
People that are religious actually tend to live longer, an average of 7 years, which is similar to not smoking.
Those that have a belief system and carry out that belief system in their life when it's based on faith of the Bible actually live longer. They actually have a higher quality of life.
Some of the connections between religion and physical health include lower death rates from cancer, less heart disease and better cardiac outcomes, and lower blood pressure and cholesterol.
So there is something real there, and so a trust in divine help is another a pillar if your goal is to live longer.
Yes, but after I do safari, what do I do?
And it's amazing to look at the connections between spirituality and mental health.
I think for an individual to be, let us say, at peace with himself and with God is very beneficial.
Exercise is so important. A frame of mind is so important. A study of God's Word and staying close to Him to bring the kind of peace that only He can bring. So all of these beautiful things together help us to understand the beauty of God's complete package of physical and spiritual health.
You'll have a lot less physical disease as well as less mental disease. So trust in God is as much of a natural remedy as exercise.
As I look at the ancient scriptures from a physician's viewpoint, it almost seems that embedded in the stories, embedded in the prophecies, embedded in the history, is actually what you might look at as an owner's manual for our bodies.
When I was finishing graduate school, and I was just trained to be a dietitian, a registered dietitian, and I'm starting to go out to start my practice, and I started asking myself, what is the best principles that I should teach people? And suddenly I started realizing, why not go back to what the designer said?
It's as if the Creator was saying, if you follow these ways, it will go well with you.
What did the designer say? Back in Genesis, he gave us some principles of exercise, fresh food, whole foods, right from the ground, plant-based foods. And I started applying these principles into my life and into my practice, and suddenly I realized that these biblical principles are universal.
I see that the word of the Bible is still coming today with healing power as people reconnect with it.
They're for all human beings, and that when we cooperate with them, we actually find healing for the mind, body, and soul.
So instead of the Bible being a book of restrictions, it is a book, if you will, of how to take care of your body.
It's absolutely fascinating when you read the Bible that Jesus spent more time healing than he did preaching. In fact, that ought to really tell us something, that our actions speak louder than our words. Yes, it's important to share things in a conceptual way, but it's far more important to do things in a practical way that will help people where they are. If you want to follow a strategy that will literally transform your health for the better, It's practicing the art of forgiving people before they ask for forgiveness.
One of the things that can release us from disease are things like forgiveness, humility, mercy. All of those things have been found scientifically to make your body healthier.
Not only will that dramatically improve your interpersonal relationships with all those people involved in your life, but it will actually change your physical and emotional health for the better in untold ways.
In fact, it's been found even when people think about forgiving somebody else, their blood pressure goes down, their immune system strengthens. Now the question has to be, how do you get to the place where you can forgive? The only way you can get to the place to forgive people who've done you tremendous wrongs is to understand that you yourself have been forgiven. God has forgiven us from all that we have done. It gives us a wonderful tool to get onto the side of health and forgiveness.
And what I find is that really we need healing where we look at the body, the mind, and the spirit. Our bodies are temples of the Holy Spirit.
In speaking of the temple, Paul says, whatever you eat, whatever you drink, and whatever you do all to the glory of God.
Your body is a temple. God created it. Jesus died for it. The Holy Spirit lives in it. This is the idea in Scripture.
And in that text, it talks about what we put into our body and what we do with our body, do all to the glory of God.
And if it's that meaningful to God, then you should probably take care of it.
And so what we find is that we have complete healing, mind, body, and soul. I oftentimes talk about the results my patients are getting. But why am I so excited about sharing these principles with my patients?
As you incorporate these principles into your lifestyle, you will see the benefits. You'll start to sleep better. You'll notice that your energy is improved. Your mood becomes more stable.
Well, back in 1988, I set out on a 30-day experiment that has now lasted over 22, 23 years, and I'm following these principles. And I suddenly realized after 30 days, I felt so much better, and I was already exercising, eating what I thought was a really good diet.
Being on this lifestyle change, I'm able to think clearer. I'm able to focus better. I have more energy.
I think differently. My memory's better. My energy's better. I need less sleep. And so when I see what's happened to me, I want to pass those principles on to other people so that they too can cooperate with the way their bodies intended to operate and feel the same way I feel.
Your eyes are clearer, your skin is clearer, your energy levels soar.
But when I really put all these principles together, the synergistic effect in my life is just transformational.
Recently, I actually started to pick up the speed, not just walking, but I started jogging.
You'll also notice that your blood pressure is starting to come down. You're not requiring as much insulin as you used to before. Maybe you'll even be coming off of medications that you never thought you would be able to remove before.
I like that. I like his sense of humor.
Humor is the way we get through the nervousness.
Being overweight, one of the biggest things on me was my stomach, or in Hawaiian we say opu. And you know what? It has melted away now. I mean, I still have a little one, but it's better. You know, I can actually see my shoes when I look down.
The diet and lifestyle approach, along with sunlight and water drinking and temperance and avoiding bad things and getting your rest and eating breakfast every day and not snacking, we know these things all lengthen life. The studies are there.
Losing 35 pounds is a huge deal. Beginning to buy new clothes for the first time, instead of going up in sizes, going down in sizes, is kind of crazy. You know, being able to shop at some stores you never shopped at before.
My stools would be bloody, or they would, the consistency would be different each time. And so when I moved over to a plant-based diet, a healthy plant-based diet, I definitely became more regular. So it's almost as if I can expect when everything is going to happen. Whereas before, I literally had to map out where the bathrooms were all the time, just because I didn't know when something was going to hit me.
When I got into the program, I was at 319 pounds. I lost 50 pounds, so I'm 269 pounds now. The last time I checked my blood pressure, I was at 101/62. which is a huge drop. I feel great.
The body heals. Give it half a chance. Give it the food that it's designed to live on, which is starch, rice, corn, potatoes, beans, peas, and lentils, with a little bit of non-starchy vegetables, maybe some kale and lettuce and broccoli and cauliflower. Throw in a few fruits here and there. Walk it around a little bit. Give it a little sunshine. You'll be amazed what you can accomplish. But you have to do it.
We now look at like 8 simple principles, things that, we're not selling a bill of goods. We're not, saying you have to go get supplements and you can only buy this from us. We're the purveyors of this proprietary information. This is all very free. It's simple. In fact, it's so simple, a lot of people won't embrace them. They go, oh, it couldn't be that easy.
I did it. I just like to encourage people to know that you can do it. And it only takes little steps, one little tiny step at a time. That's what I did.
But it turns out it really is that easy, and we discover that the people who actually choose all of the 8 laws, we call them kind of medical or health laws, if they choose all of them, the truth is if we had a community of people who were embracing all of those in the fullest extent, I really believe we would have a community of people that would be living way past 100 years of age.
The reason I started doing this is because my wife decided she wanted to do this.
I love telling people my story. I love sharing that. And then it's really cool to see the people grab onto it and change in their lives. And so I think the social benefit for me is being able to share what I've learned and help other people feel better.
It's a much more economical way of going. It has no downside, has no side effects. It's going to help your brain. It's going to open up your thinking.
But if you had a community where they embraced all of them, I really believe that it wouldn't just have a higher percentage of people that live to be 100, almost everybody would.
It's not about living to be 100. It's about living to be 100 in good health. Nobody wants to live in pain and agony and not being able to do anything.
I have no aches or pains or deficits of any kind.
So it's not like more years of misery, it's a lot more years of the abundance that God intended for us to have.
Actually, you can increase the quality of your life and the enjoyment of your life if you just stick with healthy lifestyle choices.
And I'm a big proponent of let's just stop cancer. Let's stop all these diseases that are happening within the States by educating ourselves. And if I can lead someone in a direction to feel better, I feel like I'm doing a service to my community, to my friends.
Each of these 8 health principles confers a benefit to the body in its own right. But what is amazing is a synergistic effect when these 8 principles are combined.
I read in the Wall Street Journal that all tastes are acquired, that the only natural taste that you have is for mother's breast milk. All other tastes are acquired.
It's really delightful to understand that taste buds can change. That's the good news. You can develop new likes for the food that you like.
I was the barbecue guy. I'm the last one that's going to do this. So having done it now for as long as I've done it, going on about, we're almost at a year now. It's pretty significant. So if I didn't like it, I wouldn't just tolerate it. I don't do things I don't like. Life's too short for that. So luckily I'll have a little longer life now to enjoy it even longer. So
Take it one step at a time. Change your nutrition and start off real small.
You will get your health back tremendously, more than you ever expected.
I cannot believe I'm at where I am. And I'm not going to stop here. I still have a ways to go, but just to see how I went from that to where I am today.
That's what we see again and again. People say, look, this is the way I choose to live.
So these principles, although we'd say they're in the Bible, they're principles that astute cultures throughout the world, living in close touch with the creation, have seen these principles and have put them into practice.
Sure, there's some permanent damage, but probably less than you ever imagined. Your body will do better than you ever expected it to. Got nothing to lose, costs you nothing either.
They gave health benefits for centuries throughout the world to those that applied them. They give health benefits today to people across cultural lines that apply these principles.
It's not always just about exercise and losing weight. It's about getting that sleep. It's about getting sufficient water. It's about getting the sunlight. It's about getting the exercise, and then it's about eating right. When you put all those things together and just let God take care of the rest, you know, everything works out from there.
You know, backed up by all the scientific evidence today, you can boil it down to one basic concept. We have learned that you can do more for yourself than any physician, any drug, any hospital, any procedure. You have to become the chairman of the board of your own health.